Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the third part of our three-part virtual series in National Urban League of Young Professionals National Day of Empowerment Virtual Town Hall, Is Your Life on Loan? My name is Shawnee Woolard, and I currently serve as the Community Service Chair of the Urban League of Greater Atlanta Young Professionals Chapter. Thank you all for joining us. Just a little bit about the background about this initiative. So the National Day of Empowerment is our signature community empowerment initiative, which brings together various chapters across the nation. Local chapters host a chain of unified community empowerment activities centered on a singular National Urban League Young Professionals initiative. And this year, we have chosen to focus on bringing awareness to the student loan debt crisis and advocating for a federally supported elimination of student loans. Just a couple of brief introductions. We have Alexandra Perisic and Jacques LaRoche here representing Strike Debt. We have Kagan Buchanan, who is on the Higher Ed Not Debt campaign. We have Travis Townsend, who is the National Programs Chair for the National Urban League Young Professionals. So I just want to let everyone know that's watching how to comment. You can actually post your comments/questions on the event page. You can comment on YouTube, or you can post to Twitter using the hashtag YPLifeOnLoan. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first question. I'd like each of the panelists to please give the history and mission of the organization you represent, and how, why you first became involved in student loan elimination advocacy. You can also touch on how student loans have affected you on a personal level. We can go ahead and start with Jacques and Alex.
Hi everyone, and thanks so much for inviting us, Shani, to be a part of this. So we are members of a group called Strike Debt, and it was a group that was formed in the aftermath of Occupy. And we've decided to organize around the issue of debt because we felt, well, first of all, that's where people really can feel the impact of Wall Street policies and politics on their lives. And also that it's a way to unite different people, so students, homeowners, people seeking medical care. So one of the first projects that we launched was the Rolling Jubilee. So debt, be it credit card debt, medical debt, and also student debt, is sold on a secondary market, very unregulated secondary market for pennies on the dollar. So we've decided to join the market, and we've started buying debt for pennies on the dollar, but instead of collecting on it, we've been abolishing it. We've started with medical debt, and we've been trying to get our hands on student debt for a while, and student debt, it's easier, it's more difficult to purchase because it's very profitable for whoever owns it. And we've finally been able to buy some student debt. We bought a portfolio of $4 million worth of Everest student debt, so it's a for-profit school. And we've abolished it, and we've been using it to build a campaign around for-profit schools, but also around the state of education at large, and really the student debt crisis, with the idea of forming something that we call the debt collective. So really, how do we collectivize to fight debt, as a collective problem? So I don't know if you want to add something, or maybe you can talk about the personal level.
Yeah, I'll talk about the personal level, but I just want to really quickly add. I joined Strike Debt. I found out about Strike Debt through Alex, but I was also part of Occupy. And it resonated with me because debt is something that, again, I'm just going to reiterate that it's something that everybody is feeling on different levels through different vectors within their life, right? But the student debt stuff is very important because there are a lot of people who are suffering from usurious rates and student debt that they have to pay back. That was super important to me, and personally as well, because I owe a lot of money in student debt that I see as fictitious, and that we can get into all of those details in a moment. But with the rise of tuition, that is an exponential rise, and wages being stagnant since the 1970s, and the university as a institution being used as something that you must pass through to be able to gain access to certain sectors of American life, right? So it's kind of like you have to go through there, but then the gatekeepers are, they're charging, they're throwing their hands in your pocket, making more than you can even pay back. For educations that I see as, something that is not really helpful to people or the world. But yeah, so the Debt Collective is something that was just launched in coordination with Everest, the debt that we bought from the students at Everest, and that's a pilot project that we've just been working on recently. We can get more into that a little bit later. But,
Cool. Thank you. Kagan will have to take you next.
Sure. Thanks for having us, or thanks for having me, and I'm really glad to hear that you guys are starting to focus on student debt and advocating for the elimination of student debt. That's great. Higher Ed, I'm with an organization called Higher Ed, Not Debt. It's a campaign that is a project of the Center for American Progress, which is a progressive think tank here in Washington, D.C. And Higher Ed, Not Debt is kind of a coalition of different partners who have come together to work to address the issue of student debt in America. We have partners from student groups to labor organizations, think tanks, grassroots groups, student groups, and individuals who are interested in student debt issues and getting involved to kind of work together as well as we can to push the government and state and federal governments to do as much as they can to address the student loan crisis. On a personal level, I became interested in student debt issues a few years ago. I was working with Senator Tom Harkin and worked a little bit on his investigation of for-profit colleges. For-profit colleges, they educate 10% of students, yet they take in 25% of federal loan dollars, and they're responsible for 40% of all student loan defaulters. So when I started working on that issue, I was introduced to the kind of student debt issue more broadly and really developed an interest in it. And then I also have significant student debt myself. I know that it's going to impact the decisions that I make down the road about whether I'm able to ever afford a mortgage or if or when I get married, that'll have significant impacts on those decisions. So it's an issue I'm really passionate about, and again, really excited to hear that you guys have decided to focus on this year.
Thank you. And take Travis Townsend.
Sure. As you mentioned, I am the current national chair of the National Urban League Young Professionals, which is an auxiliary of the National Urban League. National Urban League is actually the oldest civil rights organization that provides daily services, founded in 1910, has over 95 affiliates across the U.S., serving 300 communities. And the auxiliary, which is the National Urban League Young Professionals, we represent that organization by bringing its issues to the demographic of individuals ages 21 to 40, bringing some young, energized, innovative ideas and energetic individuals to the movement. We're actually celebrating our 15th year anniversary. The National Urban League focuses on economic empowerment generally, so jobs, affordability of education, health, wellness, anything that sort of creates a barrier to economic prosperity. The National Urban League will attack it and make it its issue. I am particularly interested in student loan debt. I'm a terminal degree student, and I hail from a blue-collar family, much like I'm sure millions of Americans. I grew up in a situation where they told me, if you wanted to elevate yourself and change your circumstances, stay down in the books, keep your nose to the grindstone. If your family's not wealthy and can't pay for school, don't worry about it. There'll be funding there. And then the money that you make after doing all that will be more than enough to be able to pay for those loans and enjoy a prosperous life that you can provide for yourself and any family or future family you have. Fast forward to today, 2014, I, like a lot of other individuals, am doing somewhat okay and proud to be where I am. but I think that the promise that was sold is definitely not equal to what we're experiencing. And honestly, even though I feel like I'm doing okay, there are a lot of individuals who, particularly coming out of school or came out of school in the last 5-10 years or so, who have just gotten a raw deal, I believe. Millennials get a lot of flack, but millennials, just like me, they did their job. They went to school. The people we're talking about, most student loan debt holders are individuals who, one, needed it because they couldn't qualify otherwise, and two, went to school and studied and probably matriculated through. And then for them to not have jobs because of decisions made by individuals, typically in the boomer generation or older X generations, it seems like it's a raw deal, and nobody talks about the issue. The folks who have the power, who sit in office, political office, they're talking about other issues that generally relate to them or individuals that they think will drive their political success or future. And this issue barely gets talked about. So I figured it's something we need to focus on because it's an issue that really impacts the particular demographic of the National Urban League Young Professionals that I serve and lead.
Yeah. Thank you. It's always interesting to hear different people's perspectives and how they became passionate about different issues. So thank you all. Our first question is going to be for everyone again. So currently over 70% of students coming out of U.S. four-year institutions have student loan debt. How can we best inform our younger counterparts about the importance of student loans and the significant impact that they have on life after college? Get started again with Jacques and Alex.
Okay. Well, I mean, of course, there are, many different ways to do it, and I think, the more alternatives we can offer, the better. One of the things we have done as Strike Debt is we've written a collective publication called the DROME, so Debt Resisters Operations Manual, that is actually fully available online. It's free. And, a lot of people have participated in it, a lot of people with different areas of knowledge, and we really tried to explain different forms of debt. So where they come from, how they function, and also what people can do about it. Both, what people can do about it individually, but also how can we collectively organize to fight it. So I think, for us, that has been part of the way to really try to put the information out there. Combined with the press campaigns that we've tried, to have with every debt buy. And then, I think, various you want to
Yeah. So there's another thing that embedded in that question is kind of like why are people in the U.S. in this situation? The 70% of debtors in relation to people in other countries. It's a little difficult to get into the nuances of that because there are different trajectories of struggle in every one of these countries. But the thing is, what we see across the board is in so many other industrialized and developing nations, they have higher education. They got to that holy grail for free, right? Mm-hmm. So, and the idea is it wasn't just dropped in their lap. It wasn't like somebody just was like, hey, we think this is a nice thing. That people had to fight for that in every one of those places and with their own histories of struggle, right? So the idea is that happened over there and multiple over there. So what we need to do is fight over here to get the same thing that we deserve, right? And so part of that is breaking down this sort of taboo of talking about our finances and our situation and how much debt we're in and how we're struggling to survive, bringing that to the campuses, having students talk to that. Traditionally with organizing, I've seen personally that it's been difficult to get to this issue of debt, of student debt, especially with students who are currently on campus going through school. But the thing is, with Everest as a big example, now that you have people going through their schooling and they're just cut short. There's just dropped. The floor opens up under them, and they just drop through before they even get finished. That's a different situation. That politicizes people. That gets people aware of the situation much quicker. And then the counterpart to that, for me, is this continuous exponential rise in tuition rates, right? So combining those two things makes the student body a place that that these kind of ideas can come out if you break down the taboos, you get people to talk to each other. And one way, really quick, to do that is, like Alex was talking about, the drum that was worked on by members of Strike Debt and people who weren't members. I mean, it's like a collective thing, right? Directing people towards the strikedebt.org website, where the book is completely free. It's being sold on Amazon too, but the money for that just goes back so we can print more books and give them for free. And the idea is to, get people to talk to each other, hold like study groups based on the ideas, have speaking engagements in universities, do debt assemblies, right? Bring your tuition bills, burn them, and bring it to the campuses and make it grow organically from the bottom up. I think that's a significant, portion of the struggle.
Can you, for the audience, can you state what JOM stands for again?
Debt Resisters Operations Manual.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Kagan, your comments on that question?
Yeah. So I guess I was thinking about sort of how future students can approach the issue of student debt before they kind of sign on the bottom line, and the things that we can do as young professionals and as mentors to help students think really closely before they take out these loans. And so I think the first thing that we can do to encourage students is to help them really consider the implications of the tuition and the debt that they're signing up for, and that includes understanding what the payment would be every month once you're a graduate, what the total interest this loan is going to require you to pay, and what the life of the loan is going to cost compared to just what the school may say is the tuition, because of the way it's structured. If you're paying your loans for 20 years, you're going to pay an incredible amount of interest in order to afford that education. And so I think if we think of students, I think students need to think of themselves as consumers a little bit more, because unfortunately, with the cost of education as it is, students need to be smart about where they go and what the implications of that tuition is going to be. And I think that has two effects. On the one hand, it helps the student to make sure they're not taking on too much that they won't be able to handle in the future. But on the other hand, I think it also has longer-term impacts. It has larger impacts on the structure of the system, so that schools, public schools, private schools, know that students are paying attention to how much this is going to cost them down the road, and helps to incentivize to lower those costs. And then I think also just another thing really quickly that I think is important for potential students to recognize is the difference between federal and private loans. There's a huge difference as a graduate about what the implications are for having a federal loan versus a private loan. Private loans, I think, in the short term can sound better because they start you off at a lower interest rate, but oftentimes those are variable rates, and they can go up rather dramatically, especially if a student misses a payment or pays under what they're expected for a month. Sometimes those private loans have automatic increases in the interest rates that can be really, really detrimental to the student and to the loan. And so I think as young professionals counseling students, we need to really make sure students understand that federal loans that they should max out on their federal loans if they have to, and that they shouldn't be taking out private loans if they can avoid it. The federal programs have so much more flexibility. Obviously, we'd want them to be much more flexible right now, but for what we've got, I think the federal loans are the best options, because you can get into, you have access to deferment or forbearance much more easily. You can enroll in income-based repayment options where your loan repayment is based on your income rather than the size of the loan that you have. Or you can enroll in public service loan forgiveness, where if you work for the federal government or for a nonprofit or for a state government, your loans would be forgiven after 10 years. And you just don't have those options if you take out private loans. So I think that's a really important piece that we need to consider when we're helping students make this decision.
Definitely agree. Travis, any additional comments?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that was just said, especially with the education piece with respect to students and what the implications of the amount of money, who they borrow from, and the value proposition. And I just would add, and I think this might have been said, but make sure we put a pinpoint on this. It's not just about college students, right? I think the conversation around student loans or college or education affordability always seems to focus on individuals sort of in college at the time. And I think that's part of why this issue isn't getting attacked like it should. You have individuals on the front end. You know, you got high school students, middle school students, and I think the dialogue, the people that we drive when we're nurturing them and saying, hey, look, focus, go to school, you will have an opportunity. And you have an opportunity regardless of your ability to sort of pay out of pocket or your family's ability to pay. We need to start talking about the real, telling them the real implications. Look, if you borrow that money, you're going to have to pay it back. The rates, you never know what they're going to look like, especially if you have a variable rate depending on the economy, and things that have nothing to do with you might happen will impact how much you pay. And it has no relation to the amount. It's seriously just because Fed has to raise the interest rates to manage the economy, you're going to pay another $200 a month. You know, and that's life changing. I think we need to start talking about that. But to add to that, so the conversation about student loan debt and how to improve the situation for students and graduates is on the front end, start having an overall financial literacy education, right? You know, what you can afford to borrow, you need to be considering. If you want to be in an X profession, you really need to know how much what the likelihood of you getting a job in that profession is, what the likelihood of your salary is going to be. Start understanding how much you actually take home after taxes. All this stuff needs to start being talked about on the front end. You know, what does it cost to live? You got to buy a place, rent a place, you got to pay for your cable, you like Netflix. Start understanding that. So then when you decide to borrow and you have an idea of what you're going to have to pay monthly, you got the real snapshot of what it's worth to you. And then start to think about where you should go to school, what type of profession. Start teaching students that there are alternatives, you know, going to a 4-year college to do something that you might be able to go to a 2-year college and do. We need to start talking about that, giving them opportunities to try different routes to get where they want to be. At the end of the day, let's think about most folks go to school ultimately to get a good job and earn a living. Education for sort of intellectual evolution sake is great if you can afford it. If you have that out of pocket, great. Go to school just for the experience. But if you're going to school to get an education and make yourself better employable, that needs to be just a pure business decision on the front end. And we need to start arming young people before they go to college, and definitely when they go to college, and start thinking about those loans for a spring break trip, or you know they want to drive around in a fancier car. We need to start having people on the ground in schools and colleges to talk about the implications of those things and how it's going to impact their lives later. And so I think getting in early, you know, 8th grade, 7th grade, and start keeping that education and evolve that education, that financial literacy through their college experience is a great way to start bringing it down on that end.
Good. Thank you. That was all very interesting commentary, and I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that if I did have that early financial literacy, then I wouldn't be in as near as much as debt as I am now. So thank you for that. Another alarming statistic, 40 million Americans currently hold at least one outstanding student loan, and the total amount of nationwide student loan debt is $1.2 trillion. The amount of debt incurred by American students is much greater than that incurred by students abroad. What are some reasons for this, and how do you think the U.S. can change its higher education system to decrease the number of students in debt and the overall debt amount? We can actually, we'll switch it up and have Travis go first.
Sure. I think there were a couple of questions in there, but I think it's been touched a little bit. The cost of education here in the U.S. is just exorbitant. And you know, we're a capitalist society, so make money, charge for whatever you can, whatever your product service is, even in education, and get as much as you can for the product, as long as student loans are available and people have access to them, and then that money can be transferred to colleges and universities to do whatever they want, fund, whether it be to fund actual education or just fund a lavish university, that will happen. So I think having more rigors around sort of what institutions, particularly public institutions, what they're there for. If you're a public institution, you're there to educate. And I went to an amazing public institution, and I love it to death. But you have some public institutions they're just very, very lavish. And if you think about it, you go as a student, you probably touch a piece of that, tenth of a percent of what the monuments to different individuals who are there, and then you chip in to pay for that. So I think bringing down the cost of higher education is paramount, right? Because as long as cost of education is there and people will buy it and they can leverage to get it, that's going to happen. And in other institutions, as our co-panelists mentioned, in other countries, education is different. It's more of a necessity. It's more of a utility. It is part of life. It is part of the goal to drive those nations to competition with our nation. To be fair, so there are pros and cons to it, but I think our sort of approach, our capitalist approach is one of the things that drives it. I also think that again, the literacy piece, we don't really know the implications of how much it's going to cost or how much we spend, so we spend whatever we feel like to go to college. You get sold on how great college is. You watch college sports, you see it on the weekends, and it's a big deal, and you want to go. And I think a lot of individuals make decisions that are more social, more peer pressure that are based on sort of what they need to get into. And as long as that's happening, you have an inflated market for education at a lot of these institutions that are overpriced. So if we start getting down to the real of what people really should be going to school for, you might start to see less people. Enrollment decrease. Schools will probably become more interested in advertising better opportunities, start reducing those tuition rates, maybe at least decrease the rate in which they hike up tuition.
Yeah. Kagan, any additional comments?
Yes, so I was looking before we got started. The Center for American Progress just released this report on state investment in higher education, and I saw that the report talks about what happened after the Great Recession, and kind of nationwide we saw that states really pulled back on the amount of money that they were investing in their public universities and two-year colleges. So I looked up Georgia, and it looks like between 2008 and 2011, Georgia decreased its investment in secondary schools by 14%, while at the same time wages decreased and the costs of attending the school increased by almost 6%. So there's this imbalance that's going on in this country where the states are decreasing, costs are increasing, and wages are stagnant. And as a result, the burden on students is much, much, much greater than it was even just, in 2006, 8 years ago, where students are facing, less opportunity to have, savings to apply to colleges, having to take out more loans in order to pay for those increased tuition, and seeing less support from the state. So I think there's, we need to think about raising this issue with our governors, with our state legislators, and in the federal government to say, hey, look, the economy is doing better now, and we need to get back to at least that level where we were in 2007, because if we can get that kind of state investment back in place, we will see a decrease in the overall burden that students are facing. And I think Travis makes a really good point. I mean, the question is, education was once considered to be a public good, something that we were all really committed to supporting, and recognized that there were significant benefits when, on the front end, society invested in education. We knew that the next generation was going to be better off for it, and that they would, be more educated, be able to apply that to the economy, and we'd all be better served by it. And so I think, we need to kind of come back to that and ask our lawmakers to remember that and to restore all that funding that we've lost.
Yeah, very good. Any additional comments, Jock and Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. Tuition has been rising exponentially, wages have been stagnant, but I just want to add, another part of the question was, why is this not a case in other countries? And of course it varies, depending on which country we're talking about, but also, in many countries, people have fought hard to obtain free higher education. And I think we really need to start talking in the U.S. about what it would mean to have free public education. And, we've actually, we've done research, we've published it, anyone can look it up online. It's called How Far to Free. And it's really not that far. I mean, in order to have free 2- and 4-year public universities, it would require an additional $15 billion of spending. Now, to most people, that sounds like an exorbitant amount of money, and it is, but it is under 1% of the U.S. budget. I mean, just to put it in perspective, if we were, if we were to have a 0.5% tax on Wall Street transactions, that would generate $300 billion a year. And we need 15 to make free public education. So, I really think we need to push the conversation in that direction. We need to go beyond, the interest rates for student loans and the repayment plans and the pay-as-to-go, and really ask, why isn't education a public good? And if it is a public good, then, I personally believe educating oneself from personal, and intellectual betterment shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a right. And it's possible. It's not a question of we don't have the money. It's a question of where the priorities lie. And the priorities are not going to change unless, we collectively organize and do something about it.
It's like what Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without demand. So you must demand. And demand isn't like, hey, can we please have this? Or like, I thought it might be nice if we could get this. Demand is like everybody bringing their A game and having the fire in the belly and bringing out that this is an imperative, right? I mean, if we don't do that, if we just take it for granted that education is something that is supposed to get you a job, and that's it, or that the way things are, the way things always will be, then that's just what we're going to get. We're just going to be shuffled from, being children and have our creativity ripped out of us, go through this schooling to become worker bees in all sorts of industries, and that's all we're going to get. So if we don't make, if we don't make this a priority, we're not going to get anything else.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And along those same lines, I know you've already mentioned some ways in which your organizations have lobbied on this matter. Are there any additional ways that you would suggest, or things that your respective organizations have done to really get local politicians talking about this matter? You can go ahead and continue with Jock and Alex.
The ever stuff? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah, as I mentioned, so, we've trying to build public campaigns around different types of debt. Now, specifically, we're working on Everest students. With Everest students, there is this group called Everest Avengers, formed by Everest students nationwide, who are, who are demanding the cancellation of their debt based on all the different, fraudulent recruitment tactics and, other stuff that Everest has done and that it's being sued about by many, state attorney generals. So that is like one project we've been working for, and we've been using this as a kind of pilot program for our new initiative, which is the Debt Collective. which is, basically let's organize debtors. We can organize them by region. Let's organize by creditors, and yet let's use leveraging powers. So let's try to renegotiate, our debts collectively. And let's also maybe refuse, refuse to pay, and who knows, maybe organize a debt strike.
Right.
In the same way the labor movement has done it, for so long. And we invite everyone to join the Debt Collective, debtcollective.org.
Kagan?
Yeah, so we're based in DC, so we've been focused a lot on kind of a strategy that includes both the Hill and the Obama administration. So recently we've been working with Elizabeth Warren's office. She has her bill called the Bank on Students Act, which would allow students to refinance their loans, which you can do with most any other debt, refinance at a lower interest rate. But with student debt, you're stuck at the interest rate that you took your loan out at, and for many students, that's at a rate that's much higher than what the market for loans would normally bear. It would be. So we've been working with that. We were really happy that we got 2 votes on the floor on the bill in the last Congress. We had a couple of Republicans join all the other Democrats, but it wasn't enough to overcome the filibuster. So we're hoping that in this next Congress, more senators will kind of recognize that this is an important issue that they need to act on. And then in terms of the administration, we've been working with the Department of Education and helping to bring up student stories to the department to let them know how important it is to expand the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan. The president last year said that he wanted the pay-as-you-earn program to be expanded to all borrowers, and so the Department of Education has been working on that, and we've been bringing some student stories up to the department to emphasize how important it is that that program be expanded, and that all the kind of aspects of the program that are available now are available to all borrowers. So that's what we've been working on.
Yeah. Travis?
Yes. So as I mentioned, the National Urban League Young Professionals is an auxiliary of the National Urban League, which has a direct department, the Washington Bureau, which is responsible for communicating and advocating for specific issues of interest and concern to the National Urban League. As of late, we've been really pressing hard on a lot of the same things that were mentioned, particularly with interest rate reductions, affordability legislation right now being considered, and loan forgiveness in connection with public service and other jobs, and trying to expand sort of the opportunities to have that forgiveness regardless of sort of your employment, whether it's public service or not. I mean, if you're not making enough to pay it back, you should be in consideration for that type of deal, as long as you're a hardworking citizen doing what you can and trying to make ends meet. So, and then now the National Urban League Young Professionals is really starting to drive communication. I think we've discussed here, and I think as a parent, that communication and understanding of the issue is probably just not, it's definitely not where it needs to be. And so, we consist of 60-odd something chapters of young professionals who fall squarely in the meat of where this issue matters. So we're trying to raise those voices, and we're communicating on a national level. This event right here is a part of our outreach to try to drive some mobility and mobilization around this. We'll be communicating and doing outreach with other organizations who have an interest. And so we're going to try to be a huge catalyst in driving this issue, driving and bringing coalitions together to make the voice louder so that it can start to be heard. And I think one of the major ways to sort of move the needle on this is to start directly asking our officials on a local, state, and federal level, where they stand. Is this something that they're interested in? Do they even care about it? And keeping track of that. Because as young professionals, we go to the polls and everybody talks about sort of what their issues are as a candidate and what they're going to do. And you almost never hear anybody talk about issues that fall on the plate of young professionals. So it's time to start making folks understand, you can't take the young professional vote for granted. There are things that are particular interest of us, and we'll be taking note of where you stand on those things. So that's an effort we're working on. I think that's something that can be done to really start making people stand up and hearing folks on this issue.
And I think this conversation will definitely, those that may have held a little bit of interest in student loan elimination will definitely want to become more involved, given all the facts and things that have been presented on this conversation. Can you all each give some more information about how one can get involved in your respective organizations? Travis, we can start with you.
Sure. I think if you're watching this, you probably have some good access to definitely the Urban League of Greater Atlanta Young Professionals chapter. But as I mentioned, we're 60 some odd chapters across the country. If you want to be involved in the National Urban League, find a chapter in your city. You can probably just Google Urban League, whatever your city is. There'll be a website. And you can probably go find out what's going on. Go to a meeting. You'll find out what the initiatives are. If you want, you can also visit the national website. It's just www.nulyp.net, and you can get some information about the organization from a national standpoint. Nowadays social media is a great way to connect. Find us on Facebook, National Urban League Young Professionals. Join our page, and then like our page, and you will definitely get periodic updates about what we're doing. This is an issue we'll be driving going forward, so there'll be a lot of information on our social media networks. So those are some great ways to get involved and really just keep up with the National Urban League. It's NUL.org, and you can really find out how to get involved. This is a major initiative, but we're also looking to drive support for a lot of the things that we do.
Thank you. Hagan?
So if people want to get more involved in what we're working on at the Higher Ed Not Debt campaign, you can go to our website at higherednotdebt.org and sign up to receive email updates about what we're working on in DC and what some of our in-state partners are working on over the next couple months. I would just say I think this is a really exciting time to get involved in this issue. We've got new state legislators across the country who are entering into their session next year, and we need to be putting pressure on them, like Travis said, to recognize the importance of these issues and to be talking about them and addressing them in the state capitals. And then we also have a new Congress, and so we'll be working on a federal level to make sure those members are aware of student issues, young professional issues, pushing for votes on different bills that will help students, help young grads afford their loans. So there's a lot of opportunity. If you get on our mailing list, we'll kind of keep you up to date on what we're doing, what our partners are doing, and make sure you know how to keep involved in this discussion.
Yeah. Thank you. And Jacques and Alex?
Yeah, like we were saying before, just it's a kind of synergistic process. It's not just a top-down, you come to us, but like if you want to start something where you are, there have been chapters that have sprung up across the country, autonomous. We're in dialogue, we help each other. You can go to strikedebt.org, and there's information on there. You can send us an email. We can have a dialogue. The DROM is on there. The Debt Resisters Operations Manual is on there for free. If I met somebody the other day, she went to school to be a dentist. Her loans are like $150,000, and I think she was saying, I don't even know how this is possible, but she was saying that they want her to repay like $3,000 a month. So like at that point, it's not really like it's like get down on the ground and do something, right? So if you're at that level, or if you want to see higher education be free, like it can be. Pell Grants is like $6.7 billion for going to for-profit schools. You've got GI Bill going to for-profit schools. It's like $1.7 billion. Remember, we said higher education for 2 and 4 years per year is like 15 billion, right? So then you just throw in an aircraft carrier or just remove, you know, some sort of predator drone, right? And you got enough money. So if you want to fight for that, then go to strikedebt.org and talk to us, and we'll get that.
And also, you can join the Debt Collective. So debtcollective.org. If there are any people listening who are current or former Corinthian student, you can join the current campaign. There's a Facebook page called Everest Avengers, and you can also join the Debt Collective. There is a separate section for Corinthian students.
Thank you all. So we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Again, you can post questions on Twitter using the hashtag YPLifeOnLoan. You can comment on our YouTube page, or you can comment on the event page. But on behalf of the entire executive board of the Urban League of Greater Atlanta Young Professionals, I'd like to thank you all for agreeing to give up your Sunday evening and almost time for Sunday night football to discuss the very important topic of student loan elimination with us. And thank you for implementing all the suggestions that you had for us. It looks like we don't have any questions from the audience, so we will go ahead and end the conversation. Again, thank you very much, and I have all of your contact information, so I'll definitely give that out to anyone that is interested. Any last-minute comments or suggestions?
I just want to commend you guys for pulling this together, for putting together a great set of panelists. This is my first time being exposed to you guys' organizations, and I'm floored and wild and very glad to hear about it and hear the activity. It's refreshing, and so Shani, good job, you guys, for reaching out and finding really smart, innovative individuals who are passionate about what they're doing to communicate some very vital information to your audience. So good job, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the lead on this from a national perspective.
Yeah, I just want to say, thank you, Shania. It's great. I think we need to have more conversations like this so that we know, what different people are doing, so that we can be in touch and so that we can, coordinate across organizations.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks for everybody's work.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And have a good evening. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great moving.